of physicality. When a child is born and the oxygen, as they say, is not or was not sufficient, some delay in the process occurs. What happens? You have to understand the process with me. I teach the process, then you understand. What happens? As the child passes through the passage of the womb of the mother, somewhere in that process there is a delay, and or there is a kind of what we call suffocation, that not enough oxygen reached, or a cut of oxygen. Life survives for maybe half an hour, 10 minutes, 20 minutes. And as you have with hypothermia, when there is a lack of, when there's cold, body shuts down different part of the blood circulation to save everything else. Brain in that position, in the birth tunnel, goes through the same process. Its priority is to keep the soul of the man in operation and lose as many filtering as possible, that life can suspend till there's a possibility of allowing the life to carry on after that stagnation in the birth tunnel. So what it does, if you're in hypothermia, the blood circulation gets disconnected. In the birth tunnel, because there is such a high process going on of the conversion from the liquid state of the birth to the air liquid condition of the atmosphere, there is a lot of switching going on. Without that birth tunnel delay, the body will not work. You have to understand, within minutes, within seconds, life, the brain, the operation of the whole body has to change from water life to gaseous life. We are in the womb of the mother. We are floating in the ocean of life. And then suddenly we have, the brain has automatically to switch in every way and cell to become adaptable to the gaseous condition. This process has never been understood. But if you understand what it does and how it goes, a lot of switching takes place. And in that process, part of the switching, because it's not sure if it's still going to be in the liquid state or in the gaseous state, the switching doesn't happen. And this is where a lot of you, as you mentioned, you come into what they call lack of oxygen in the birth tunnel and the rest of it. In fact, it's not the lack of oxygen, it's the switching from the two cycle of life. So what happens? The cycle of life in the liquid state brings the maturity of the brain to a point. And then because it doesn't go through the air cycle, it doesn't switch as it's supposed to. So what happened? The brain stays in the liquid state growth, which is limited, and it doesn't go to the high active gaseous condition. So now what you have is what you call the lack of oxygen, but in fact, the whole brain is there, you have to switch it. If you do the switching in the later stage in life, the longer it takes. If you do the switching very early stages of life, then you can see a child becoming normal. So what you have to do is to understand this process. If you understood this process, exactly why you have got what you call any deformities, especially in the intellect or in the understanding of the environment, or you call it handicaps, indifferent, or mentally retarded, is because the switching hasn't happened. You're switching to the birth point in the liquid stage is complete. You need to bring that switching in, or give it the condition that the growth can carry on. So what you need to do is, as is the blue line around it, you create the same condition as the womb of the mother, but you allow the condition of the air to take place.
Mr. Keshe?
Yes.
can I interrupt? What if it's not? What if the reason that the lack of oxygen was due to a blood loss, not?
Doesn't matter. It's still the same.
It's still the
What
same.
happens? Yeah. What happens is that the switching of the brain takes place due to majority of the not switching, or could be panic. It's like you have a stroke, you have a shock. It could be anything. But what it is, you see the brain of the child when you take MRIs, when you see in the scans, in a perfect condition. But you don't see mental development. So what it is, it's very simple. It's one of the simplest way to give a child back to the parents as a perfect child. Is, once you understand this process now, is to replicate the cycle of life. That's all you need to do. What was happening in the body in that position? What does the body need? It needs calcium. It needs potassium. It needs magnesium. These are all part of the brain structure. It needs what the body was doing in the womb of the mother. I've told you many times, many times, that when you go to a doctor, you say, "Doctor, I'm thinking I'm pregnant." He does the test, says, "Congratulations, you're going to be a mother." But next sentence is what? You better take some folic acid to increase the rate of the production of the cell. Folic acid, or what is known as B9, is nuclear atomic agent, which means it has a lot of energy to give to increase the rate of production. If you look at the skull of the man, as the calcium pieces drops, go on the medical teaching we've done before, on the health teaching, these calcium, like a snowfall, separate from the skull and fall into the brain, and they gradually become part of the cell of your brain. So, to replicate the womb of the mother, you need calcium. To be able to concentrate on the work of it, you need magnesium. You have to have potassium because of the condition of the K4041, which is again a radiation division source. Then, what else you have in the structure of the brain? Zinc. There is no copper in the brain, so you don't need to use copper. Now, you've got to adapt and replicate the same condition. So now you have B9, your folic acid. You need to bring in the order of the creation, replication of the acidity and alkalineness and the oil level of the body of the child, which means you have to satisfy his emotion and his physicality. Omega-3, EPA, as much higher than the other part of the folic, what do you call it? The EPA part of the folic acid, the omega-3 has to be higher. You need to create a condition of the comfort connection, CO2. You need to bring energy balance, because when you deal with the brain, zinc is part of the physicality, but as part of the emotion and soul, you need zinc oxide.
So to create, does the body naturally create that precipitate of calcium in the skull to replace?
Every day your brain is doing while you're talking to me. Your brain cells continuously showered in by calcium from the upper layers. Your skull is not there just to protect you. If you take your skull away, you don't produce much cells. calcium is the corner base of the structure of the physicality of the brain of the man.
So does that process that it's...
Am I going to finish? And then you can ask question.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
So now you see the ingredients needed. Don't forget, at the normal rate today, the child eats everything or whatever, so it's just enough. Maybe even has triggered that switching from the liquid to the gaseous condition, but not enough. So the child is always behind 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. So with this, you're trying to speed up the process. To speed up the process, you have to increase the availability of the material, that when the process starts, if there is a need for it, it jumps in. Look at the standard level of recommended dosage of any of these. And don't forget that in the part of the process, the brain has joined the physicality now too. So you have to support the emotional part of the physicality at the same time. That's the ingredient you need. So you're using it normal. It's very simple. To have it, to be able to kick it in, what is recommended is 2 times the average dosage for the first 4 weeks to 6 weeks of these elements.
In the GAN state?
You can use GAN state or you can use the matter state. Omega-3, EPA higher, you can buy off the shelf. Calcium, potassium, magnesium, you can use vegetables which produce this naturally, or organs, and make the GANs of it, or use it as it is. The zinc the same, and the same B9 folic acid. Then you add the same way 30 mil, 30 mil, 30 mil, 30 mil, 30 and 60. Drinking as a water. These are liquid plasma, not the GANs itself. In these conditions, you don't need to use GANs. You just make the energies available. Then you take it to the next step. You need to create, don't forget, is emotionally, it's the brain part which is damaged. So you need breathing system, 80-20, zinc oxide, CO2, 3 hours a day, preferably most of it just before the sleeping time. You will see the change in the child within the first 7 days and the development of the brain to the total full awareness within 3 to 6 months. And that'll be it. Whatever you achieve in 3 to 6 months is there. At the moment, the trials are going on in Ghana with a number of cases we're looking at. And we have seen the change of the 15-year-old girl to with a mentality of 2 to 3 years old to a mentality of 6 to 10 years old in less than